Welcome, everyone. My name is Abby Gaddis, Director of Partnerships at Rhinogram. Rhinogram has received an outpouring of questions from partners and clients about how practices can use our telehealth tools to maintain operational continuity and see patients remotely during these difficult times. So we're coming together on this webinar to share some insight on how you can use Rhinogram to help your practice through this situation, whether your office is closed or staying open. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please ask them in the GoToWebinar control panel. We've reserved time at the end for questions, and we'll be sure to follow up via email and phone call with any additional questions we don't have time for today. We'd love to learn more about your practice and how Rhinogram's teledentistry platform and telehealth platform can make a difference in your organization. So email us at hello@rhinogram.com to speak with a product specialist in your area. COVID-19 has flipped all of our lives upside down, and our practices are dealing with the reality of a new normal. That's why we need tools to screen for symptoms in advance, triage patients in urgent situations, and continue engagement and marketing, but also keep our staff and patients safe. Our team is working around the clock to bring offices live in as little as few hours. I'd like to introduce Dr. James Thomas. Dr. Thomas is with us today because he offers a unique and vital service treating infants with tongue tie. He practices in a suburb of Seattle, putting his office at the heart of one of the highest concentrations of COVID-19 reported cases. And he's come up with some creative ways to stay open but also stay safe. Dr. Thomas has faced unique challenges during this time, and he's been ahead of it using Rhinogram. COVID-19 is a major problem, and problems need solutions. Dr. Thomas, tell us a little bit about what you've seen and how you're dealing with it.
Yeah, thanks, Abby. And I appreciate you having me on. Yeah, just a little bit about my career in the past and what's going on in the future. My career has kind of taken a long and winding road, and it's kind of had its ups and downs. But at the heart of it, I'm a pediatric dentist, and I grew some practices here in Seattle that went really well, and it's kind of all been about brand. But something I noticed in my pediatric dental career was just kind of changes in the way the kids were growing, and it kind of definitely changed the outlook of my career. I've really been about brand my whole entire career, about pushing messages that I think are important for children in pediatric dentistry, and now with the infants. I started with a brand that was called Every One by One that kind of became synonymous with seeing children at age 1. I then walked away from that in 2016 to eventually start Health Watch and work with babies, specifically struggling with feeding issues at the breast because of oral tethers, which are lip, tongue, and buccal ties. And now I'm kind of heading towards a software platform called The Circle to kind of educate families. So really the overarching of my career has been about education and pushing a message that can help people. And now, we're kind of moving on. And Seattle is a hotbed right now, as you said. And what's happening in Seattle is slowly trickling across the country. I'm a positive person, so I have a positive spin that we will come out of this. But to give you an example, I left the office late last night, and from my office to my home is about a mile or two drive. And between my office and getting home, I actually passed nobody. So the streets are empty, and we're all kind of staying at home. And so how do you reach your patients? How do I see patients? My procedure, if a baby can't feed, it is kind of fall in the urgent category. One of the things people don't think about is as toilet paper and things like that are coming off the shelf, so is formula. So families are definitely needing to feed from the breast and in other ways. So that's what we're staying open to help. But we have to mitigate that time to keep ourselves safe and our teams safe. So I've been leveraging technology my whole entire career. And so that's what I'm doing with Rhinogram. And it's really it's a different time right now, as you all know, I'm sure, across the country, that communication is king, not only internally with your team, but also externally to the patients that we see. And we're hoping to go through that a little bit today and kind of add a little bit of value probably to your businesses as I go through. So what are we facing? We're facing mandatory closures across all specialties. Think about it just in terms of our kids. Our kids are at home right now, and I think for many of us, we're all figuring out that the teachers weren't the problem. But as we have our kids really close to us, but there's a lot of closures in businesses and in schools. There's a high rate of cancellations and no-shows, and it's how do we, manage that, and how do we turn it off? But I think more importantly, how do we turn it back on as we come out of all this with COVID-19? How do we manage extreme patient volumes in pediatric dentistry and in orthodontics and many medical practices out there? We see very high volumes of kids in pediatric dentistry. It was usually about somewhere between 50 and 80 and sometimes 100 during spring breaks and things like that. How do you manage that call volume? It's very difficult. And engaging with patients about their treatment plans and being able to send it to them if they lose it. I'm leveraging technology through Rhinogram to do that, and I'll share a little bit about that today. Communicating with staff members remotely. I have a policy where no one in the office uses their personal cell phones, including myself. There's kind of a division between church and states, and we just don't want any HIPAA compliant information to be pushed through our personal cell phones. So, but that, goes on to, how do you communicate with them about COVID and the changes in the offices that we have right now. Just a snow or a power outage at the office. So communicating with your team 24/7 is really important. And I do that very easily with Rhinogram. Limited access to resources and the phone. This is a really key topic for me in this webinar. Because my message through Health Latch has been very difficult. Tongue tie is just a lot for a lot of what I say herding cats to kind of get around and understand why we're doing this on infants. So the message is really important. And one of the key limiting factors as I started this little startup healthcare niche in Seattle in Bellevue, Washington, is that the phone was because I was actually making the phone calls, the doctor, and I know that doesn't happen in many of your practices, but to get my business off the ground, the phone was what we used at first, but we really realized with young families that were tired, it was very inconvenient, it was very inefficient, it was very inconsiderate many times, and it was very ineffective for getting our message across. So I knew that was an epiphany moment for me, and that's really what I want to share. Is that epiphany that no one really uses their phone anymore because of all the robocalls. So we have our teams, calling high volumes of people that aren't really answering the phone anymore. So that's when I knew something had to change, and that's when I moved to Rhinogram. So and it's been great. Those first original text messages, the success team walked me through because I was a little nervous about them. But and I don't expect this for many of the practices out there, but I went from being nervous about it to sending my first text to turning off the phone probably in a week's time. I don't use the phone at all in the office. My voicemail says that we communicate via text, and there's a portal for them to get through in the website, and that can be easily acknowledged through a demo with Rhinogram. So I use it for both external communication with my patients and pushing that message, but also internally to build culture. So if you're seeing patients like me right now, it's about staying engaged with those patients. And for me, as COVID hit across the country, really the main thing I see most offices, medical, dental, and beyond, to see emergency patients, and that's where we're at in Washington State right now, just seeing emergency patients. There's usually someone sitting outside the office, and they've got a mask on with the 3 questions that we all know very well to screen people for COVID. But the problem, and take their temperature, but the problem with that is that the patient's already bringing that possible virus to your office. So I actually shoot a video every night that I shoot out through Rhinogram, and it basically says our protocol based on what happened the night before with the governor and the recommendations. And the families are asked to drive to the office to be there on time. And they get a text about maybe about 15 minutes before they arrive, and I ask them to stay in their cars. And that's what the video explains to them. They stay in their cars until the last family, when the last baby's treated, and they're escorted out, and everything's wiped down, and then we allow the next family to come up. And this has given such reassurance to the families that we're taking this seriously. And obviously I can triage those 3 questions even before they come to the office, before they're standing at our storefront here, our brick and mortar. So you got to stay engaged at this time. And it's really like a flow of a river is kind of how I think about messaging and using Rhinogram. It's there's so many rivers flowing for so many families, so many messages coming at them. And the only way to get some attention is to actually stand in the river and kind of be there when they need you, in the way they need you. And we know text is kind of king right now. So I've marketed myself. I think people know Health Latch really well, and babies and doctors. I've really sent the message to where we started was with 3 providers that really understood what we were trying to do in 2016, 17. And now I've been referred a baby from about 1,400 different providers. I have providers writing in from other hospitals and other clinics that now know that I'm textable, and they'll just ask me a quick question. I'm able to set up things within Rhinogram, so all those questions only come to me and not my entire staff. So there's a lot of usability within Rhinogram. And just the pre-screening is what I touched on before, and just being HIPAA compliant with everything we do. And not having them have to go to a portal on their phone to actually log in to get the message. They're using their phone just like they'd use it to text their grandmother. So I encourage patients initiated care, and it's kind of open-ended questions that they can ask. They can just shoot in questions anytime. And I've slowly made templates to all those questions. They're almost like keywords at this point, so I can quickly answer questions back and forth. So the, what do we do now that our practices are somewhat closed? I think we have to stay engaged. And, Health Latch is no different than all the practices out there that are really struggling, all the businesses that are really struggling. I've had to lay off most of my team. And so it's a skeleton crew here. I am now an administrator in my own practice. And because Rhinogram is so easy to use, I'm able to use it. I'm a main user in it. I use it every single day. So it's been great to stay engaged while we're closed. Market your services, what you do and how you do it. And really, for me, it's about, if I was to give you any advice, it's about using this time to change your habits. As professionals, I would assume there's a lot of professionals out there. We wake up at the same time and we go to the same gym and we get the same coffee and we listen to the same radio stations. We arrive at the same time and we kind of work our way through the office with the same social cues, and we might even tell the same jokes every single day. And those all become habits. And one of the habits we have is using this phone. And as I said before, that phone is dead. So now's the time to change. I always like the quote by Einstein that said that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So I think in this downtime, if you are truly closed and hurting out there, I wouldn't be ducking. I would be really using this time as a resource to build on what you currently have. Tools for remote workforce, as I talked about. One thing I would say to this point is I've never thought about what I do. I don't do a lot of marketing per se in terms of AdWords and Google Ads and things like that. That's never been part of the mantra of what I've done throughout my career. But now that I've got Rhinogram, I really don't feel that if you put 2 offices that were both treating babies at the exact same time and doing the exact same service and having the good care that we offer families that are struggling with feeding issues, I really don't feel like other offices can educate as well as I can. And it's hard for them probably to compete with someone like Health Latch, because we are robustly sending out information, and really families come in the door knowing who we are. There's no sales once they come in the door, because they already know me as a person, even more so than a doctor, because I've spent the time to educate them through text messages and videos that I shoot out through Rhinogram. And again, internal communication, I would say the word has to do with culture. That's the one thing we do in our businesses. We're so busy with patient care is that we don't build culture. I think the framework, the organization that Rhinograms come together to build this powerful software can actually build culture for you accidentally, even just by the team communicating. Culture is really communication, making sure nothing's misconstrued or there's no gossip about anything in the office. And just by communicating through these portals, very easy portals, the team can really start to gel. Maybe it's a birthday text or an anniversary of someone who's worked in the office for a long time that gets sent out. And again, stop using personal cell phones to do all that. It all should go through the portal. So, and then organize and reschedule your list. And what I mean by that is, in Google, email, they do these little nudges that remind you to email someone that you emailed in the past. And you can do something really, really similar with Rhinogram really easily. Is you just click on this little thing that allows you to star something you want to follow or you want to follow up on, and it goes into a separate folder for me. And I look through that probably, I have a ritual to look through it about once every other day. And I can then follow up on that text that I sent to a client about their baby, or maybe it was a tough situation or they were having a tough time. They sent me a question that they're having a tough time, and I can follow up on it within just a couple of days. And that just really brings the care full circle, that you really care about them. We're all busy and we'd love to be able to just remember, but that's not me. I can't remember all the patients that I saw in the past. So having those reminders are really, really, really important for me. So, and then we're kind of moving on to how we leverage Rhinogram. And so for me, I've just really leveraged Rhinogram to the max. I can't say enough. It's a foundational piece in my organization every single day. I'm proud to speak about it to as many people as possible, because I do think it can transform what you're doing inside your office and externally, as I said. And there's just the ability during COVID to be able to be safe and screen people before they come in, ask them to wait in their cars. Families really understand that. I love the texts that come after on the night before saying, thank you so much for all you're doing to stay open. People are even bringing us little gifts and presents for staying open during this time to be able to see their babies. So it's been a big leverage for me, and it will continue to be in the future.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thomas. I feel like that information was so insightful, and I'm sure we have viewers watching this presentation who maybe don't have Rhinogram today. So I would love to just take an opportunity to show you exactly how this works within the platform and how you can accomplish what you're hoping to do inside of Rhinogram. So let's talk for just a second about how we kind of set you up. So Rhinogram is a telehealth tool that promotes text-based communication with your patients, because that's the most convenient way to get your message to them and for them to reach out to you. And that's the way that we communicate with our families, friends, as Dr. Thomas said, in everyday life. So the first thing that we actually do is we take your main office phone numbers, the ones that patients typically call into, and we make them textable. And your voice calls will continue to go wherever they normally go, but the text messages will get routed into Rhinogram, where your staff can log in, you can log in, and it's a secure password protected portal. And that's important. And just reflecting back on what Dr. Thomas said, it means that you can effectively and efficiently triage, screen for symptoms, especially during this time. The statistic out there right now is that for every call center that's answering healthcare related patients for questions, there are 2 calls coming in every minute, and it's just not possible on every phone line. So it's just not possible for us to manage that scale and volume with regular phone calls. And so Rhinogram gives you a way to direct your patients to conveniently communicate with you, and you can templatize all of your responses to make it very scalable. And what that means is when someone does require a phone call, you know that you've triaged them, or they require an in-office visit or a video visit. It's because you've triaged them through text message first, okay? The second way that we plug into your practice is through your website. Now more than ever, I can't stress this enough, because we've talked to so many practices who are thinking about maybe cutting off their marketing or reducing kind of their effort in that area. And it's really as important, if not more important now, to continue to stay engaged with prospective patients. Because when you come back to your practice, when everything goes back to normal, if you aren't doing that in the meantime, you will not come back to the same practice that you left when all of this started. So we plug into your website and can replace any kind of chat tool that you might be paying for. And what we do is we allow website visitors to enter their cell phone number, their question, and their name. Now you have their marketing information, so you can follow up with them. But you've also eliminated any kind of friction that would normally happen with a chat tool, right? So they don't have to wait on the phone for you to, or they don't have to wait on your website rather for you to respond back. They get their question off their chest when it makes sense for them, and your team can follow up when it's convenient for you. And if you're not able to answer your phone in the practice or answer your email in the practice, this is an amazing way to get those inbound marketing inquiries saved inside of Rhinogram, so that when you are ready to reschedule patients or start getting those people who reached out to you while your office was closed, you can blast a message out to them and let them know that you're scheduling once you reopen, if you happen to be closed. And if you happen to be open, then great. This is a great way to engage them quickly and convert them and get them into your practice. And then finally, we plug into your practice through Facebook Messenger. So we all have a lot of downtime right now, where a lot of us are at home, and we might be scanning Facebook for reviews and looking for new providers and thinking about who we might want to go to when offices reopen. And normally you would not want to exchange things like PHI on Facebook, because it's not a compliant place to do that. But when you bring those conversations into Rhinogram through our Facebook Messenger integration, it becomes a compliant conversation. You can ask things like, give me your insurance information, or let's do a virtual consultation, and continue that conversation on. So that's kind of what the setup looks like. And what that allows us to do is really three things for your practice. Like Dr. Thomas mentioned, the first one is new patients, right? So he's been able to grow his patient base, and most of our providers see between a 10 and 30% increase in net new patients. The second area is really around engagement. And now this is so important. You know, people aren't necessarily, not everyone knows what's happening in your practice right now. Not everyone knows what's happening in the news. People are confused. Am I able to go to the doctor still? Is this doctor essential? Is their office open? Do they have different procedures? Now is the time to over communicate with your patients so that they have a really positive experience with you and feel like you're being proactively reaching out to them and telling them what they need to do. And that also extends beyond this situation. When you're giving your patients a great quality experience, they'll be loyal, they will refer other patients to you, and you'll create a better experience overall. Go ahead, Dr. Thomas.
Yeah, and if I could speak to that, I think you're getting to the save part, but you know, my flow in my practice is very similar to this. It's really interesting. You know, I have kind of like a capture, qualify, connect is kind of how I think about it, and I talk about it with my team. And the capture is just kind of being out there and being able to capture this information. Sometimes for me, it just comes in as a simple text, and a lot of those I couldn't figure out where they were coming from, and they were actually coming from mothers that were inside a doctor's office that said, that the doctor's now saying, just text his office your name and your email and he will communicate with you right away. So it's happening instantly. So that's conversational marketing. And then qualify for me is just that I don't want all the patients, like I only see 0 to 3 months. I have a qualifier. So I don't want to see all of the patients. I want to qualify them, and you want to do the same in your practice. And then the connect is when you get the green light. So it's kind of like having this conversation at a cocktail party, and then someone says, I want to come, and then it's easier at that point. And the transition and the client journey, the customer journey, as I call it, is a lot easier. And the connect obviously is Rhinogram for me.
Yeah, great insight there. And then obviously on the save piece, which I think you were alluding to earlier, I know your practice is really leanly operating right now, but you've always been a pretty lean operation. Isn't that the case?
Yeah, oh, for sure, for sure. I mean, Rhinogram is going to repurpose, I will tell you, some of your team. It really will, because if you can imagine, at least I imagine my old office where I had high volume in pediatric dentistry, it was very difficult for people to be on the phone at that front desk and also serve the clients that are coming in the door. So I eventually built a business center in order to allow them to be more fluid with the customers. If I had Rhinogram back in those days, wow, it would have been out of control. It would have been so neat because I would have been able to repurpose people. And over text, people understand, like, you know, this pause in between the text. I shoot pretty virtually in real time, but they understand that there's a little bit of a pause. So my crew is very small right now, but they understand that there's a little lag time. On the phone, it's just got to be a conversation or putting people on hold. So so we're all busy. So it's been a great fit for me.
True, true. And one of the biggest pieces of feedback we get from clients is that their teams are just really happy after using Rhinogram because it makes their job easier. I worked in a practice for many years myself, and I know one of the biggest challenges is playing phone tag, trying to get information from patients, and reaching out to them is just made so much easier when you have accessibility into their text messages. It's just completely different than email, completely different than calling on the phone and leaving a voicemail. You get almost instantaneous responses, and it makes your life easier because you can move on to the next thing. And that's what we hear a lot of our teams say about Rhinogram, is that not only is it saving them a lot of time, but it's just really a game changer from a happiness perspective as well. And so I just want to talk a little bit about what other things you get with Rhinogram, because obviously you have the ability to do those virtual consultations, exchange images. Patients can send you pictures of issues that they're having, but there are other things that come along with that text message interaction, and I want to talk about that. HIPAA consent management is an important thing that Rhinogram does. It gives you the ability to collect consent for this kind of treatment and digital communication, and store it within the patient record in Rhinogram. And you may be thinking, okay, well, HIPAA right now isn't something that we should be concerned with. They've lifted regulations on that temporarily, but I would be thinking in a more forward or long-term fashion. I would be thinking about selecting tools that I can use after we return to normal, because this will not be our experience for long, hopefully. So the other thing that we do is integrate into your electronic health record or your electronic medical record, which allows us to do things like appointment reminders and sync up with your patient and appointment data. Again, we give you, and Dr. Thomas uses the custom template library pretty heavily, but we give you a library that you can customize and create answers to questions that are frequently asked and educational information for your patients. Anything from directions to your office to a post-procedural, packet of information or a video. Those are the kinds of things that you can load up as templates and quickly, within a click of a button, send to a patient. So it creates a lot of uniformity on your team and also makes it very quick for your team to do it.
Yeah, I mean, just to speak briefly, I know this is a hard stat for people to hear, but since I started Health Latch, I've never had a cancellation, and that hasn't been filled because I have real-time awareness, as Abby was greatly speaking to. And I've never had someone come late because it's really important, because one of the factors with the babies is they all come in hungry. So no one can ever be late. And when you explain it in that way, families really understand I have to be on time. And then obviously, if I have some sort of cancellation, occasionally I'll get a cancellation because a baby needs a circumcision, and I know about it and I can fill that spot in the schedule. And then just being on time, Seattle's I speak very highly of the Rhinogram, because Seattle, when it's not COVID, traffic is very difficult, and families are coming to me from 2 and 3 hours away, some using a ferry sometimes to get to me. And it really speaks to how efficiently I'm speaking to families about the clarity of my message and getting them there on time. I even have a template that shows them with a drone where to park in the parking space and what our building looks like. So, and that's what's driving the communication that's getting here everybody on time every day.
Awesome. And in addition to all of that, we also surface some analytics that help you understand the messaging that your patients are doing and your response timing, the volume of messages. But importantly, I would tell you, where are those messages coming from? Are they coming from your website? Are they coming from your main phone text line? Are they coming from Facebook? Where should you put your marketing dollars? And as we start to build our practices back up to reopen, knowing where your net new revenue is coming from is going to be huge, so you can multiply that success and add value and continue to generate new leads for your practice. Some things that make Rhinogram different than other solutions. One of them I would tell you is that we're ONC certified for secure messaging, which means that if you participate in MIPS or MACRA, you can get reimbursed. You can use Rhinogram for your secure messaging numerator and get reimbursed for the conversations that your providers are having within Rhinogram. It also means that we've gone through a really rigorous security screening and process to get certified in general, so you can rest assured that your data is safe. And that's important not only from a HIPAA compliance perspective, but consumers are focused on, what are companies doing with my data? How is my data being protected? So you all want to make sure that you have that covered. Another thing that we do is we offer you a text to pay solution called RhinoPay that allows you to send a text message link to the patient to collect on a balance. So if you have some unpaid bills that are sitting in your accounts receivable and you want to collect on them, you can literally, instead of sending a paper invoice and spending the money and time to do that, send a text message out to that patient. It reduces your days in AR, it increases your chance of collecting on that fee because it's convenient. Imagine the difference between clicking on a link and plugging in my credit card information versus receiving a bill in the mail, having to call into the practice, or worse, having to write a check and mail it back. So that helps a lot of our practices stay on top of their collections. And then most importantly, the patient doesn't have to learn anything new. They're not downloading anything. They don't log into anything. They're texting your practice like they text their friends and family. And I can't stress that enough, because a lot of other tools don't work because a patient has to remember a login and the onboarding process is painful for them. But adoption rates with Rhinogram are sky high because it's just natural to us. We all do it in our everyday life. And again, we seamlessly integrate with your EHR or practice management system. We've listed a few that we integrate with at the bottom, but that's not a comprehensive list by any means. So reach out to us if you have a question about yours. But this allows us to do things like sync data, including your patients and your responsible parties or guarantors across platforms. Reminder messages again. So if you want to consolidate tools, this is a great way to kind of get everything in one place and a big bang for your buck. And then we have something called Conversation Select and Save, which allows you to kind of export clinically relevant pieces of your conversations with patients, so you can get them into that patient chart easily. This is what it looks like when you log into Rhinogram from your browser. Your staff will have access at their workstation. It's a cloud-based tool, so you don't have to download anything there either. But we have this concept of smart message routing. So with all the efficiency that we've talked about already with templates and just texting versus phone calls, this really is a game changer here, the smart message routing. It allows you to get conversations from the patient to the right person in your practice seamlessly and quickly. So if it's a scheduling question, it can go to the scheduling team. If it's an appointment or a clinical question, it will go to the clinical team. If you have a referral come in, it can be triaged by the referral team. And this is something that we work with your practice to set up. So we don't give you Rhinogram and say, okay, go figure it out. You know, here's our out-of-the-box configuration. We actually work with your team to understand how your practice operates and reflect that. And we can do anything from a one doctor practice all the way up to multi-location, multi-site configuration. So it really is something you can use to streamline workflows and enhance your operations. And we combine Oh, go ahead, Dr. Thomas.
Yeah, just to kind of give a real world scenario about team chat, it flows really easily. The biggest thing for me is all of this is happening in real time. This isn't sticky notes of people you have to call back because you're able to text. You're sending them a message that they might not see for a few minutes, but usually the open rate is really fast, obviously with text messaging. But it can also, like I said, happen internally. I'll give you a scenario where maybe team members are leaving dishes in the sink. You can go by and take a picture and send it to the team and say, this can't happen. No one loves a micromanager as a boss, and no one wants to be micromanaged, because so you can just work on that team flow and that chemistry. The main thing I hear when I'm consulting is that offices are having a lot of turnover of team members. So there's a lot of good things about just internally communicating so nothing gets misconstrued.
Yeah, and that team chat tool is just so important right now when a lot of us have people working remotely. And maybe you don't have access to your normal communication tools in the practice. You can use this because it's secure and encrypted. You can talk about patient issues. If people are spread out, maybe your billing people are working from home and they have questions for you about a particular case, they can securely message you about those, and it really gives you a direct line into your practice. And you can have secure one-on-one messages or create groups. So like Dr. Thomas said, if you want to make an announcement to the team or share some kind of training or in-service, you can do that with inside of those chat groups. And it also allows you to triage emergencies. I know we've kind of talked about this a lot, but I'll give you a real life example. We've had a patient that's texted in and had an ongoing case of strep throat, and they needed another round of antibiotics. And as opposed to having that person come into the office and potentially infect other people around them, this doctor was able to refill the prescription, understand what pharmacy they wanted it to go to, and get it out to them. So this is a real world example of a way that you can kind of manage and triage those emergencies before or without the patient having to come into your office, delivering home care instructions through text message. And then let's say they do need to come into your practice. Now at least you know what you're dealing with, and you know how far out you can schedule them based on the severity of their issue. Is this an immediate urgent thing that needs to be seen today, or can it wait until my next open slot next Tuesday, let's say, for example? So it just gives you better tools, more information about the patients that you're treating. A dental example here, right now we have a lot of dental offices are closed, but still taking in emergency cases. This lets you validate that it's an actual emergency before the patient comes in, and you can also gauge your need for supplies and imaging and test results before the appointment. So maximizing your time, lean operation, but also giving that amazing service and care to your patients who are so valuable to you. So I want to leave you, before we start taking some questions, with some key takeaways. Care delivery has changed permanently, and it's not just because of COVID-19. We've seen this trend happen over the last 10 years. Consumerism has impacted almost every other area of life, from Uber to Amazon to all of the tools that we use every day to get our, to accomplish the task of living. And in healthcare, it's no different. We're seeing that patients and consumers are wanting convenient options for care delivery. And so COVID-19, I think, has put a magnifying glass to that, and really helped us all understand how we can utilize these tools and why it's so important to do that. But it's going to be, I don't think that the toothpaste is ever going to go back in the tube, right? So when you're looking into your crystal ball and trying to see the future and pick tools for your practice that will help you have longevity and be able to serve the needs of the modern consumer, I would seriously consider telehealth and teledentistry as a part of that package. And virtual patient engagement has to be part of your practice workflow. It has to be, not only for scenarios where you might be shut down like this, but let's just face it, email, 20% open rate. Phone call, phone tag, 2 to 3 days, that's time and money spent trying to get a hold of people. Text message has a 98% open rate, and it's the most effective way to communicate, and we all love doing it. It's the thing that we do in our everyday life. And, elevating your staff's focus and allowing them to spend their job on more meaningful activities than leaving voicemails and making phone calls, some of that administrative stuff that we do all the time. It gives everybody a sense of purpose and more happiness in their day-to-day life. Dr. Thomas, do you have anything you want to add to some of these takeaways for our audience today?
Yeah, I would say very good points, Abby. The main thing I would say is what we should be focused on is how do we turn it back on when we finally get that okay that we can come back to the office. Is that an engagement with our team? Is that an engagement with the patient? Yes, all of that's included. And so I would spend this time to kind of start to think about how are you going to turn this back on. And I think it's a lot more difficult over the phone versus starting to have that patient engagement. And they're going to be used to a new way of practicing. So I think layering something like this on at this time, so when they come back, it's easier for them to communicate with them, and they just get used to this is the way, we'll never be caught in the situation again. This is the way we communicate now. The other thing is just from a business consulting standpoint, when I rebuild teams or offices, this is pretty much the framework I build around now, because I really think that the restructuring of something that's kind of broken has to be done in a way that makes the entry point for the consumer as easy and informative as possible. So many people think of that front desk person as a front desk. A front desk is a piece of furniture. I like to make them the director of first impressions with a strong tool like this to go forward with. So that's probably the last thing I would add is just that the structure of how we communicate in an office is changing. So, start with something that's robust that can really grow with you and scale with you, like Rhinogram.
Awesome. So I think we've had some questions come in here. So I'm going to go ahead and call some of these out. Let's take a look here. So one of our participants or audience members is asking about how you deliver videos through Rhinogram, and asking about if you send it through a link. And I think the answer is yes. You want to talk a little bit more about that, Dr. Thomas?
Yeah, so I know Rhinogram's quickly getting towards video, but it was really important that the clients see me and they get some reassurance. There's sometimes some information I have to give them because I need to delay their baby a little bit. Yes, they want, I'm now getting calls when the baby's only a couple hours old, and I don't want to see babies that early. So I decided I didn't want to put things on YouTube and make my own YouTube channel for the world to see. And I know there's ways to make that private, but I went with a company that I could just shoot video instantly and it would be stored in the cloud forever. And then I would be able to copy a URL and I throw it quickly into Rhinogram. So there's actually a course I'm putting together on how I use video and Rhinogram together, and that will come out in the near future, hopefully. But yes, they're just links to a set of videos that I have, and I shoot personal videos for every single client that comes in about their particular baby. And it's a little bit longer of a time than this time frame allows, but at the end of the day, it's a URL that's stored in a database, and I just send them the link that they can watch as many times as possible. And that's how I do my post-op instructions as well for the babies. I send it to them actually before they come into the office, so they know what the post-op care is going to be should they need a tongue tie release for their baby.
And I would tell you, for anyone who's watching today, look forward to Rhinogram having our own video solution in the very near future. We are actively working towards that, and we should have some good news for you very soon. Another question coming in about whether or not we sync with Dentrix. The answer is yes. And of course, we will definitely have someone follow up with you to give you some more information about how that all works. We had someone else ask, or say rather, this seems pretty overwhelming. Dr. Thomas, tell us about what it was like to get Rhinogram up and running in your practice. Was it a lot of work?
No, I mean, the success team walked me through it. To be very transparent, it was more me than it was them. Elizabeth, I know her very well at this point. She walked me through how to use Rhinogram, what it was all about, all the connections, and it went very smoothly. It just took me just a couple of, probably a couple of weeks, and just little nudges from Elizabeth saying, "Hey, Dr. Thomas, have you sent that first text?" And it really was just a couple of texts, and I was getting real-time information back. So the actual flow, I think what the viewer might be getting overwhelmed with is the flow. We talk about how we kind of manage a customer's journey through Rhinogram. But the actual framework of Rhinogram is very simple and very user-friendly. So it's just a matter of figuring out what your problem is, and that's what I tell people about this software is really it's limitless. I mean, if you have a problem in your office and it has to do with communication of any kind, treatment plans, internal, external, you can make a system, and that's really my DNA. Is I love systems and I love system building to make systems and processes go smoother for internally and externally, but definitely not overwhelming.
Thank you so much for giving your insight on that. And I would just add that, our customer success team is really world-class and kind of holds your hand through the process. It starts with a kickoff call where we really try and understand how your practice works, and then we'll set you up to reflect that and hopefully enhance that workflow. And then we train you and give you exactly what to do, how to market texting to your patients. We help you and your team shift from a phone call first paradigm to a text message first paradigm. And then we teach you how to use Rhinogram, and it's not that hard to use. If you know how to text message on your iPhone, then you know how to use Rhinogram. It's really, really simple. It's just about putting some thought around how am I going to use this? What is going to be, kind of my application? And you don't have to do it all at once. You can start with just responding to patient questions and then kind of build out your processes from there. Just like any good thing, it's worth putting kind of the time into thinking about, how you're going to get the maximum success out of it.
Yeah, and to bring that question full circle, as I talk about these things so fluidly, and I say this in the speeches I give when I talk about the application of meaningful tech to a practice or an office or a business, I truly want people to know I'm not a techie person. I'm the guy who, when my printer goes offline, I get a little nervous that I'm going to be able to put it back online. And so, and what I mean by that is really what I am at my DNA is a relentless problem solver. And so I looked and I searched and I failed with some other, what I call storefronts, which have, they say they can do it, but behind there's not a mechanism that actually allows it to be HIPAA compliant. And so this is what I landed on. So, but I'm definitely not a techie person whatsoever. I pretty much YouTube every problem that I have in order to solve a problem.
So we got another question that's asking, can you use this to manage emergency calls when you're out of the office? And the answer is yes. You can download Rhinogram as a clinician onto your Android or iOS device, and it allows you to basically get those messages from the comfort of your home, and you can kind of screen them if they're emergencies. We also have a tool called an autoresponder feature. So you can set up your office hours. Let's say you're open from 8 to 5. And anytime someone messages in outside of those hours, you can have whatever customized message you want it to say. So it could be something like, thanks for messaging our practice. If this is an emergency, text this other phone number or call this other phone number. Or it can just be, someone is monitoring this line and will follow up with you as soon as possible. So there's lots of different ways you can implement it. Rhinogram is highly configurable, so it really can do probably anything that you might ask it to do. Another question we have is there a character limit for incoming and outgoing text? And the answer is no. So you might be looking at other solutions. I know there are some out there that have character limits. We don't place a character limit on your messages. Some people who maybe have really old phones or old plans, there's a really small percentage of people who can't accept what's called an MMS message, which allows for those larger character numbers. And those folks wouldn't be able to receive those messages, but it's a really small segment of the population. But it's not a restriction that Rhinogram puts on your messages at all. Daniel is saying, at the end of the day, our work phone says we're out until tomorrow. Can Rhinogram do that? Or do you need to be accessible 24/7? That autoresponder is the perfect thing for you, Daniel. So you're able to put that message on when you're after hours, and they'll get your out of office message. So they'll know that your office is closed.
Yeah,
And you, go ahead.
real quickly, I've built a lot of things and it's taken a lot of my time, but I really feel like I got a lot of work-life balance back when I incorporated Rhinogram, because I don't always have to be on when I'm away from the office. Someone can basically manage the incoming inbox, and if it really needs to be pushed up to me, it will be pushed up to me. But when back in the day when I had a phone and everything was emergencies coming to that line and I had to watch that line, it was difficult to step away and be with my family, which we all want to do many times. So I really feel like this is a part of just organization in a way that I got some of the work-life balance back.
We've got another question about, can you have video consults through Rhinogram? I might have already addressed this, but Rhinogram is developing a video tool right now, and it is coming very, very soon. So we'll make sure to let the whole world know, and definitely you know when that tool is available. How will you market this, or let us know when the lecture or webinar is ready? I'm maybe not quite sure what that means, but we definitely do help you to market the fact that you can text in your practice, and we'll teach you how to kind of set up your template library and blast out messages to your patients so that you really have a head start on using it. If I didn't answer that question correctly, then let me know. Does the office need a specific type of phone system to make this most effective? Great question. We can typically work with any phone number. So whether it's a VoIP system or a landline, our team will check it for you and make sure it's compatible. 99% of the time we can use your existing phone system. So nothing you need to do differently. And it's just a matter of getting it all set up. And then one person is saying, so if you'd like to talk more with Dr. Thomas, or you'd like to get more information about Rhinogram, we've got some information on the screen for you. Great places to start are hello@rhinogram.com. Text or call 423-800-7644. Dr. Thomas has graciously offered to speak with anyone who wants a follow-up from him. So I will make sure to get your information over to him if that's what you've requested. Another question coming in, do staff members use their personal cell phones? Do you integrate with Ortho2? Yes, we integrate with Ortho2. Do staff members use their personal cell phones? That is up to you, Lisa. So, you know, Rhinogram has a mobile application that you can download onto your phone. You don't have to download it. You can always use Rhinogram from your browser, your internet browser on your workstation or desktop computer. If you want your staff members to be, like, let's say, monitoring Rhinogram in the evening, they can download Rhinogram onto their phone, and because it's an application and there's no information or PHI actually being stored on their phone, it's actually compliant for them to do that, and they can use Rhinogram just like they use it on the workstation. But of course, you could always say, no, I only want you to use Rhinogram on the workstation. It's really your preference and what your practice policies allow. Can Rhinogram be used in place of a telehealth voice phone call that's billable to insurance? There are a number of codes that support what's called asynchronous encounters or asynchronous telehealth visits. And they really fall under a different category than live video. So it doesn't replace live video from a billing perspective, but there are separate codes that you can bill. I would encourage you to look into the category of store and forward, or what's being called virtual check-in codes, because that's what kind of is covered when you are reviewing an image or some text that a patient sends in and send them back some medical advice. That's called a virtual check-in. So we'd be happy to get you more information on that, Angela. But then again, Rhinogram is also developing a live video tool that you can use for those live video consults as well. So eventually you'll be able to bill for either, and Rhinogram will support those. Can Rhinogram encounter be billed as a telehealth visit? Another question about billing. Again, virtual check-in. I'm happy to get you some more information on that. Can we talk about the virtual smile assessment tool for those of you in orthodontists? Yes, I'd be happy to talk to you about that. So like I said, we integrate with your website, right? So you can request virtual smile assessments, or you can market those in a couple of different ways. One is that you can use the web form or the button that we place on your site, and it can literally say, request your virtual smile assessment. And then you instruct the patient through the use of a template to send in some selfies of their teeth. It's really simple. They literally can click the selfies at home and text them into you. So they could do it through regular text message if you're marketing yourself out on Google or something like that. They can do it through your website, through the web form. They can just, if you have someone call into your office, you can say, text us some pictures of your teeth. And then you're able to go through this process of basically getting some, evaluating the pictures and then getting them some information. And what patients are usually looking to see is, one, how much or what kinds of treatment do I qualify for? So can I do clear aligners, or is it traditional braces? 2, how long is the treatment going to last? And then 3, what are my financing options or pricing options? What packages can you offer me? And our practices use this method, and what we find is your chair conversion rates skyrocket because you're really qualifying the patient in advance of them coming into your office. They know how much it will cost, so you're kind of weeding out people who aren't necessarily good fits for your practice. And then you get to interject and kind of teach them all about why your practice is so awesome before they ever get there. So you could do things like send them a welcome video link, or give them a little informational packet right to their text message about how you take care of patients and why you're different. And so it's a really great tool. We have a team that has lots of information on Rhinogram University. So once you become a client, you'll have access to Rhinogram University, which has all kinds of videos and fact sheets and tools that help you to understand how to bring this live in your practice, and they'll also teach you all about it. We're also founded, incidentally, by a practicing orthodontist, Dr. Keith Dressler, who does the virtual smile assessment and kind of invented this way of doing it in his practice. And he's very successful with it and is happy to talk with any client of ours about how to get that going for themselves. Question directed towards Dr. Thomas. You mentioned you were developing a class or lecture. Dr. Thomas, do you want to talk a little bit about the circle?
Yeah, no, there's a couple of classes I know I have to put out. I'm getting in front of video. I have a videographer. I will launch those classes through most likely the Health Latch website and Facebook pages. But I just want to start to help people understand just like how I think about business. Speaking to your point, about qualifying patients, there's a ton of people out there that have ads that will push, you pay money for, and they'll push 100 patients in your door every single month, and a lot of promises that I don't always think are kept. But personally, I don't have that philosophy. I don't want 100 families just coming in at the same time where I have to figure out, are they my ideal patient? What I feel like I use Rhinogram for is to kind of sift through that before they even come into the office, because I do have some qualifiers, and I'm sure all of you have qualifiers about what you're specifically trying to do with your mission, your brand. And I don't think bringing everybody in is ideal. And so that's what I want to help teach people. The framework of Rhinogram is super simple to use, but the ideas behind what you can do with it are endless. So we don't want to, you don't want to dilute your brand. You don't want to exhaust your teams, because 20% of it's the 20-80 rule. 20% of the people cause 80% of the problem. So you don't want to bring in 100 people that you're going to have to deal with. Both those patients take the same amount of resources. So I'm all about seeing less patients with more quality, more efficiencies that already are my ideal patients, lowering the overhead so you can then grow a bigger business and not exhaust your team with just a ton of families that are just pushed through your door, and maybe half of them don't even match what you do. So no, just kind of putting together ideas right now about how I can teach about that and shoot that out to the world.
That's such a great value that you're bringing to other clinicians, and we're so thankful to work with you and have partnered with you over the past couple of years. And we have many more questions that unfortunately we don't have time to get to today, but I promise you we will be reaching out to each and every one of you, and Dr. Thomas has offered to personally answer any questions that he can as well. If you're wanting more information, we are going to be sending out a recording of this video, of this webinar afterwards, and I encourage you to respond back to that. We'll also have someone that is able to reach out to you if you've asked a question. And again, the contact information for Rhinogram is here on the screen. Thank you again for everything that you do in your practices, and for coming and joining us today and just learning a little bit more about how telehealth can help We're honored and privileged to be a part of your lives and to help you in your effort to serve patients. So thanks again. Pleasure speaking with you today. And thank you, Dr. Thomas. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Abby. Have a great day.